Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Hope you're enjoying the conference. So I'm here to talk today about Incarda Therapeutics. We're working on atrial fibrillation, specifically looking at resolving acute episodes of atrial fibrillation, which is a significant unmet need worldwide, with over 30 million people worldwide suffering from atrial fibrillation, over 6 million in the US. It's a significant cost to the healthcare system, with over $50 billion in the US alone attributed to atrial fibrillation. And there's no safe and effective drugs available to treat acute episodes of atrial fibrillation outside of a hospital or medically supervised setting. Incarda's lead product of InRhythm is inhaled flecainide, which is actually a safe and effective drug that's been used for several decades for the treatment of atrial fibrillation, but in oral and IV form, and certainly, as I mentioned briefly, not available to treat wherever you are, wherever you happen to be. Our lead product has several advantages. One is that it results in very fast cardioversion. So within 3 minutes of when a patient experiences an episode and undergoes our nebulizer treatment, which is about 8 minutes long, it is faster offset than a typical dose of IV flecainide, which is used for acute cardioversion, but only in the hospital setting, and therefore requires less monitoring time after the patient has received it. And as I mentioned earlier, in addition to a medically supervised setting, which would be our first indication, we are hoping to be able to develop this indication for the equivalent of a pill-in-the-pocket use. So wherever a patient may be, whether they're traveling, whether they're at home, outside of a medically supervised setting, which of course will allow patients to convert back to normal sinus rhythm much more quickly than they otherwise would, not having to go to the hospital for electrical cardioversion or for IV cardioversion, which, by the way, is not available outside in the US, which is the largest market for this treatment. It has been significantly de-risked. We are now in the midst of a phase 2 trial that we're wrapping up, where we have proof of concept data that shows we can hit our target product profile safely and effectively. And we now are planning to raise a Series C of $70 million to take us through the first pivotal trial of our first indication, which is medically supervised. We actually have a very rapid path to get there. We hope to initiate the phase 3 trial by the end of this year and be able to file for approval a year after that. Significant value creation opportunity. We've done extensive health economics work that shows that we can have quite attractive pricing for both of these indications based on the fact that we expect significant savings to the healthcare system. And there are a number of recent metrics pointing to an increased interest in cardiovascular exits. So both IPOs as well as recent acquisitions make this area quite attractive because we believe it's been ignored for quite a while. We actually have a very strong and experienced management team, board, and investors, and I'll go through all that in a bit. So as I mentioned before, over 30 million worldwide. This demographic is, because of changing demographics globally, this is growing quite rapidly with aging demographics. AF is a progressive disease, so it starts in a phase called paroxysmal, which are intermittent episodes that usually self-resolve within 7 days. But if you talk to an AF patient, even a few minutes or a few hours is too long. So many of these patients are suffering for days before it self-resolves. And 8 to 10% of patients in each of these buckets progresses to the next and more serious phase every year under current treatment paradigm. We hope to change that. In the US, for example, there are up to 1 million visits to the ER a year. And given that there's 6 million patients in the US, each experiencing 4 to 6 episodes a year, it shows that many patients actually aren't even going in for treatment. Because when they go to the ER, they're many times given rate control and sent home or hospitalized for observation, but without having their symptoms resolved. And actually, AF is a significant significant cause for ischemic strokes. And it's quite dangerous to be in AF for longer than 48 hours. You need to be on anticoagulation to reduce the risk of stroke. Eventually, many patients actually need an ablation, which is not curative, actually only works in about 50% of the time for the first treatment. And many patients actually need to have multiple ablations before they have permanent relief of their symptoms. So because, and I won't describe all of these right now because I've alluded to some of them, because there are no good treatments for patients to be able to get back to normal sinus rhythm in minutes, what happens is patients are quite frustrated and terrified. They actually are very educated about AF. They understand that they're at high risk of stroke. It's a very terrifying feeling to have these palpitations and the dizziness. And patients are extremely frustrated when we talk to them and we describe the treatment we're developing. They're quite excited to be able to have this. And in fact, we're working with some of the leading advocacy groups to begin planning our enrollment in the US, which will be later this year. So because of all this, as I alluded to earlier, it's a $50 billion cost to the system. And an ideal profile for a new treatment would be one that rapidly restores the heart back to normal sinus rhythm in minutes, and that is safe and effective and quite safe for use out of the hospital such that a patient could actually treat themselves. Something that works to relieve the symptoms, which is something, as I mentioned, it terrifies the patients, and ideally reduces the hospital and hospitalization and healthcare cost burden by reducing visits to the ER and reducing subsequent hospitalization. When patients go to the ER in AF, over 60% end up being hospitalized for at least one night. So how does it work? We actually have a breath-actuated inhaler that we have worked with a partner called Trudell. It's an off-the-shelf device. It's inexpensive and it's available globally already to treat respiratory conditions. And we've developed a proprietary formulation that is delivered quite efficiently in just 8 minutes at the dose that we're working at. Gets into the lung quite rapidly, gets absorbed, delivered to the pulmonary veins and right into the left atrium, which is where atrial fibrillation starts. And of course, the advantages of the inhalation route is the very, very rapid delivery at a lower dose and rapid clearance, and it makes it very easy for the patients to self-administer. Flecainite's actually recommended in the US and Europe in treatment guidelines, both for IV therapy as well as oral chronic use. It's also recommended in an off-label way for oral use for acute treatment. The problem with that is it's not well studied. It's never been approved for that particular indication. And so even though some physicians prescribe it, it's not well understood how to maximally apply it, and it can take hours for a patient to convert. And because it's quite a high dose, many patients don't like to prescribe it for their patients to actually take themselves without medical supervision. And the dose we're targeting can be a half to a third lower than what's typically prescribed for the acute indication. So our vision for this is that we would first launch the indication in a medically supervised setting, which could be urgent care, ER, hospital, could be a skilled nursing or home health. And after the patient has first successfully used it under a medically supervised setting, once we have approval for the patient-led indication, they could use it anywhere, home, work, traveling. You could be at this conference and experience an episode, go sit in a corner for 10 minutes and resolve your episode and carry on with your day. That does not exist today. Our target product profile is that for the very first time that someone shows up to the ER or medically supervised setting, if they convert at 40 or 50% of the time, that's a target product profile that we've tested and it's been quite acceptable and in fact enthusiastically accepted by ER physicians and EPs because of the rapid conversion time. And the reason it's 40 to 50% is that flecainide IV is actually effective at about 60% of the time. So if we can reach the majority of those patients the very first time they use it, that's a strong target product profile. And once a patient has been shown to be a flecainide responder, we expect it to work 70% of the time when they take it at home, probably higher. That's a minimum target product profile. So where are we in clinical development? We're in the middle of we're finalizing part A of our phase 2, which was an open label ascending dose trial where we've optimized the formulation. We're about to do a confirmatory dose and also take advantage of the fact that we can start doing a patient-led pilot such that after the patient has been dosed, if they convert, they can sign up for the follow-on study, which is they would come back and do it again to actually show that target product profile for repeat use. And then we'll be starting our phase 3 in the fall. We're hoping to raise our Series C by early summer so that we can initiate phase 3 preparations. The pivotal trial for medically supervised will be a 3-to-1 active to placebo trial, 400 patients total, and likewise for the patient-led that will follow after that. This chart's a little bit complicated, but what you need to notice is the threshold for conversion has been established in the literature for various uses of flecainide in various formats. And we find that when patients are not too nervous or not too scared to inhale, remember they're coming into the ER with palpitations and terrified, so some of them aren't able to inhale perfectly the first time. When they are able to inhale well, we get actually quite high conversion, between 65 and 70% conversion. So our expectation is over time, as we're able to learn how to train patients, help them relax when they go in for the first time, the conversion rate for the very first time will be quite favorable. And we've also shown that we've been able to optimize the dose as well as the formulation such that we're reaching our target product profile. And in the right-hand chart, what we see is various thresholds of concentration of peak peripheral PK from patients as we improve the dose. And we see that for the latest cohort all the way on the right, most patients are over that threshold that you need for conversion, which is the green and the purple. We also show that the mean time to conversion after inhalation dose is 3 minutes. Where you see some under 0 is because 0 is the time point at the end of the inhalation. And so 3 minutes, many of those patients convert actually even before the inhalation is done. Where are we now? We intend to initiate the confirmatory dose and the patient-led pilot and begin our phase 3 preparations. We hope to start enrollment by the end of 2020, finish in 2021, and be able to submit soon after so that we can get approval in late 2022. Not shown here is we will also, in 2021, start our patient-led pivotal trial. But the use of funds for this round will be focused up through NDA submission for the medically supervised indication. So our CMC is very low risk for both drug and device. We'll be using blow-fill sealed preparations of the drug. It's room temperature stable. It's fairly efficient to use and very easy for the patient to use. And the Aero Eclipse nebulizer is what we use. It can be plugged into medically compressed air or a tank, wall air in a medically supervised setting. And for outside of medically supervised setting, it'll be in a portable compressor, which patients can use. They can have multiple versions of it, keep one at home or the office. It fits in backpacks. It's actually quite easy to use. So market research shows significant support from both ER physicians as well as cardiologists. And the market is quite significant in terms of the millions of treatable patients for both indications. This slide summarizing conservative estimates for the market is actually already outdated. We just received updated pricing and payer report, and we actually can increase that very conservative pricing estimate. So the market is very attractive, and we have exclusivity till 2038, which I'll go into in a minute. The other thing that helps us is the preponderance of Apple Watch and AliveCore and other devices being developed that increase the market and awareness for AF. I mentioned intellectual property. I won't belabor the point here other than to say we're approved, or we have exclusivity through 2038 and are expanding beyond that with additional claims and additional formulations. I mentioned earlier some of the comparables in the market with both Milestone's IPO as well as some of the recent acquisitions and successes from cardiovascular companies. We have a very experienced management team. I was at Gilead Sciences and a number of biotech companies for many years. And we have a number of cardiovascular and inhalation experts in the company. And our board is composed of leading independents such as Dan Welch, who has had many successes in the industry, Norbert Bischofberger, with whom I worked at Gilead, and a number of key investors from leading firms. So we are now in the process of talking about our Series C. If any of you are interested, I'd be happy to chat and send you a non-confidential, and happy to answer any questions, although we may be out of time.